Hi, and welcome to Sonic Academy. I'm Paul Hamill, and this week we're joined on the line all the way from Berlin by Drumcode Records, Dustin Zahn. How you doing, Dustin?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
How's Berlin treating you this weather?
Well, today it's finally starting to get sunny, so
A
yeah, it's a bit better than the last couple days.
little bit of sunshine, but of course, sunshine's not the best kind of weather for making dark underground techno music for nightclubs. I assume.
Yeah, but that's why there's so much of it here because we rarely get any. So,
So you released Monoliths, your debut album. You've been producing though for quite a number of years. What's taking you so long getting the first full length album out there?
actually, it was kind of a mistake on the media's part because what we try to get to and explain it was that basically I agreed to do it over 4 years, and I actually wrote an album a couple of times over and then got rid of it. But what people can actually hear right now is, it took me maybe 4 to 6 months to do. But the reason that it took 4 years overall is because I had to move to Europe, and that really delayed everything by at least 2 years.
Yeah, so you originally grew up around Minneapolis, around the Midwest in the States. What was the techno scene like over there when you were growing up?
Um, I mean, it was really exciting times, that's for sure. It was more of like a rave situation, whereas like in Europe, you're a bit more used to festivals and clubs. And aside from the Detroit festival, I never went to one until I started playing at them in Europe. So it was really good, but we were used to having more stateside names like Mike Dearborn and Green Velvet and people like that. So when the European guys came over, that was a pretty big treat for us at the time.
And was there a whole crew of you running parties and making music? I know some of your other kind of guys out there, like Decimal and those kind of guys. Were you all part of a crew, all sort of hanging out and making tunes together? Or
Well, I mean, since the stateside scene is pretty niche, um, all these stateside guys kind of have to stick together, whether it's in your city or within driving distance or on the internet. So, I mean, nearly everybody from the States, maybe not in the past couple of years, but up until that point, I was in pretty good with because it's very community oriented. But directly in my local city, yeah, there was a good core of people that were doing parties. I teamed up with a guy and we brought everybody you can think of. There's other guys in town that did a really great job of bringing in people like some of the first appearances from Ben Clock and Marcel Detman, and they'd also support a lot of the U.S. guys too. So it was pretty strong, and it still is.
are you glad to be out of the States now with the current explosion in electronic music up there? I mean, you're going the other way. You're coming to Europe while everybody else seems to be heading stateside. What's your feelings on the way things are going out there at the moment?
Um, of course, there's a negative aspect to uh, how cheesy this music is, but I prefer to look at it in a positive light. Um, it really did start blowing up after I moved to Europe, so I don't see it firsthand every day. So I guess I'm not jaded by it or anything. But it's really nice that there are new people getting into this because I'll be honest with you, it has been a complete struggle to try and fill the clubs or put festivals together. So people complain about, things like Electric Daisy Carnival or these big parties, myself included. I'll make fun of it. But I mean, at the same time, there's people I've met that 2 years ago they were hardcore into things like Dead Mouse and Armin van Buuren or whatever, and now they're into things like Chris Lee being Richie Hot and whatever. You know what I mean? So like, there's people that are digging, and I think it'd be pretty naive to say that you know that's a new thing. I mean, I got into it through popular electronic music. When I was a teenager, things like Prodigy was really popular. Granted, I think Prodigy is a little more talented and interesting than a lot of this EDM stuff, but there was still some mainstream influence that I had to latch onto in order to get into this.
Yeah, so let's hope it's a pathway for many people that's ultimately sustainable over the long term, as opposed to being something that some people see as just being an explosion followed by a crash at the end of the day. I mean, you've been working with Drumcode on this record. Was Drumcode always in the plan? I mean, you've many other outlets that you've released music on over the years. What was the decision behind releasing the album on Drumcode?
Yeah, well, you know, working with Drumcode was always kind of, back in the day a dream because that was when the label was really closed off. Only Swedish artists were on there. So in 2008 or 7 or whenever, when Adam asked me to do something for the label when he was just starting it again after the minimal bubble, I was blown away. And of course, I had to do something. And I did one record on that and a couple records for the sister label True Soul. And at that point, he started talking about the possibility of an album. And also, coincidentally, I had a couple other labels come up to me as well that approached me with album deals. Um, and they were all, really big labels. So it was kind of a tough call because they're all great people. But in the end, I decided to go with Drumcode because Adam has actually supported me since the first record had ever come out. He ended up becoming a good friend to me, and I like kind of his direction. He's kind of, at the moment he's kind of going for more of like a festival sound, more of a gateway name, but he loves and supports everything. Like it's totally in his blood. So I just thought that this was a great platform for me to be on, and it's Drumcode. It's great to get your name out there.
Yeah, you've been known for your sets at some of the drum code parties in Berghain, where I think the longest set I've seen on SoundCloud was maybe 10 hours or something like that. How do you go about
Yeah.
preparing for something like that?
Well, I started, for example, some of the longer sets that I've done there, I'm telling myself like 3 or 4 months before when I know it's going to happen, I'm like, okay, I should just start setting stuff aside or writing notes for what I want to play. And then I end up putting it off and putting it off. And then it's a week before and I'm like, oh crap. I'm so unprepared again. Like I'm being really unprofessional. But really, when it comes down to it, I just kind of get an idea of who's playing before me. I've been to the club a million times, so I know what works at what times of day or night. So I kind of get an idea for the first hour or two, and then let it go after that. By that point, you're in control of the vibe. You've had a couple drinks or whatever, so I kind of just freestyle it. And for the most part, it works. I'm sure over the course of 9 hours, there's some moments that are a bit dull or messy, but in the end, I think it really makes sense. And it must work because they let me come back. So that's good.
I mean, was Berghain a big influence in your decision to move to Berlin, or was it more to be sort of in somewhere that's a central hub of electronic music and for, logistical reasons, getting around Europe and doing gigs? Was that the primary kind of factor in your move?
Well, primarily it was logistically and financially. Plus, I have plenty of friends that live here that had moved from the States or that were already in Europe. So it just felt like a place where I wouldn't be alone and I wouldn't have to struggle so hard to get by, if I was making less money at the time or whatever. But of course, obviously, the scene here was really influential. I mean, like, yeah, Berghain is great. It's arguably the best club out there, but still there's like Trezor, there's Ground in Theory, Dystopian, all these other great parties that were going on. And like I said, as an American that didn't really get a lot of that back in the day, I was like just really excited to be able to get involved in that and experience it and see people that I really looked up to when I was younger just like leave and be 10 minutes from them, from my doorstep. So It
Great, yeah.
was a good influence.
It's obviously had a big influence on the sound of your record. I mean, listen through to Monoliths, a lot of the tracks there, you can just imagine them at Berghain at certain times of the day or night. Was there ever kind of temptation? I mean, you find techno albums can be a lot of time hit and miss. Sometimes producers might decide that they're going to go and, explore the experimental side that to the horror of their fan base. Was there ever temptation for you to do that, or was it always going to be a straight up club record like what you've delivered on Drumcode?
Yeah, initially it was going to be all experimental,
Yeah.
because that makes the most sense in an album format. It's kind of a bit awkward to do just straight club tracks on a club album, but in the end I went for it anyway. But initially, yeah, I had so many different ideas and like concepts, and I thought about it. And since my roots are initially in experimental music, I thought if I'm going to do something experimental, it's got to be just as good, if not better, than what I can do with my techno output. And at the time, honestly, it wasn't. So I thought, let's revisit that idea later. I mean, I think that's what's up next for me. I'm already working on something else that's more experimental. But yeah, like you said, some of these guys, they get this idea that they're going to be producers of other genres, and then the album was really just kind of like the first 12 sketches that they made of this new stuff. And I really didn't want to have a weak album of that. I wanted it to be strong. So
Good stuff. Okay, so moving on to sort of studio situation. What's your kind of setup? What did you start off using out when you first started producing? Out of interest.
oh wow. Well, I started producing in 98, and I was pretty young at the time. So I had like Rebirth on the computer. That's kind of where it all started. And then more interestingly enough, when I got into hardware, uh, my grandma dug up out of their storage shed out at a farm. They found an old, was it the Mini Moog that,
Wow.
my uncle, when he was younger, I guess he wanted to play the synthesizer or something. So they got him one. And then, of course, like that happens with kids, it just never pans out with some of these hobbies they try. So it sat in storage in this plastic bag for decades. And she didn't know what she had. And she's like, here, do you want to? She brought it to the doorstep. She's like, do you want this thing? I'm like, hell yes, I do. So that was actually one of the first pieces of gear I got. I bought a Yamaha RM1X. When I was younger, I did web design, and I did all these jobs to buy that. And I needed a sampler because I was still trying to do live PAs and stuff. So I ended up having to sell the Moog in order to buy a couple of Yamaha samplers, which I regret, but at the time it was what I needed to do. Then, of course, I broke both of the samplers. So by that point, I was starting to kind of get out of outboard gear because I was using Fruity Loops, and Ableton was just coming out. So I just transitioned to the computer for about, yeah, 8 to 10 years. And I just started buying gear again a couple of years ago and buying the pieces I couldn't afford when I was younger, and just, having fun with it. So now I have a pretty cool studio.
What does your setup include then? Talk us through some of it.
Well, technically I have two studios. I have one in the States and one here. The one in the States is very bare bones, but you know, I have, what do I have out there? I just got another Korg Volca Beats to mod. There's a TR8 there. Um, there's like this old Boss mixer I just got that's really great for distorting stuff. They used to use that on the old Drumcode records, like Harry Bush and those guys. And then here in Berlin, that's kind of like my flagship studio. I built that from the ground up, and special like acoustic paneling. And for gear, there's like I just bought a Prophet 8 in the winter that I really love. I got another TR8 there. I have an MFB synth 2. I had a Dark Energy, but I just sold that. Uh, let's see.
How do you find the TR8 compared to the original 808? Are you loving it?
Honestly, yeah, I don't really like it.
Do you not? Okay. What's
But the thing is like it's great for jamming out on, but from a studio perspective, it's only got one or two outs or something like that.
Right.
And the USB thing was a kind of cool idea in paper, but it doesn't really work out, just because the recording quality, the bit rate's too high, and which it'll crush a lot of computers if you're trying to multi-track, and it ignores a lot of information like panning and effects and stuff like that. But it's great for jamming out, and I think it's not bad for a $500 clone, you know? So I'm going to keep it on to the next firmware update and see what they fix on it and what they add to it, and then decide what I'm going to do.
What workstation are you using at the moment then?
I've got, yeah, Ableton mostly, and just I have a Allen and Heath Z mixer. I'm questioning buying one of the Midas Venus mixers.
Oh yeah.
In the States, they're dirt cheap in the States, but in Europe, they're kind of expensive. So if I can figure out a way to cleverly get it past customs, I'm going to be working with that in Ableton real soon.
Okay. When you start out in a project, are there first steps that you always take? Do you like to work off templates that you've saved within Ableton, or what? How do you start off? Is it loops or melodies or what?
Yeah, well, basically, it's just an idea. Sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I want to make something like this old track from the 90s. Or sometimes I hear a vocal sample and I'm like, I got to use that in a track. Some days it's just, I'm creatively bankrupt. So I sit down with my sequencer, got one of those MFB Erzberg ones. It's kind of like the old Doper ones where you just turn the knobs. And I'll just randomly turn the knobs and make some bleepy stuff up and just jam out for a couple hours and save a bunch of loops and see, the next day open it up and be like, that was pretty good. Let's try with this. So it just depends what I'm going for.
Sure. And would you, in terms of your bus compression and all that kind of stuff, you tend to get a big, wide kind of, techno sound. How do you achieve that in terms of the plugins you use? What are your go-tos?
Well, I guess when it comes to things like compression and mixing and whatnot, I'm actually I'm not necessarily stubborn or uneducated, but I prefer to leave the master chain. I always have a limiter on it because I tend to get a little loud and things start peaking. But I try not to go too crazy with compression or anything like that on the master channel, just because I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I mean, I have an idea, but sometimes I ruin things. In the end, you got to trust your ears. But waves are kind of classic industry standard and wave plugins. And then when it comes to the actual mix down process, I guess I'm more than focusing on plugins or mixing, I'm focused on the sounds and where they sit in the spectrum. Like when you listen to an album like Monolith, it's busy, but it's still fairly stripped back. Like I look at the spectrum and I realize, okay, the kick drum is pretty thunderous, so you're not going to get a big groovy bass line in there because it's taking up a lot. And then I separate things out. Your synths, your vocals, I try to keep them in the mid range, and then keep the highs pretty tame. I like shakers more than hi-hats and stuff. And I find if I just kind of keep it stripped back and simple, I don't have to worry about all the compression techniques and stuff as much. But I almost always do some side chaining on bass lines and stuff like that, just to like give it a little bit more punch.
Are you a fan of sort of mid-side processing as well in any of your stuff? It sounds like you've got that kind of thing going on,
Yeah. I
Brainworks.
mean, definitely a bit. It again, it depends on what kind of track I'm going for because every technique's different. But there's definitely a lot of that because a pretty typical theme in the more current stage of my music is emphasis on a big kick drum, and to do that, if I do some side processing, it seems to really make it stand out more. So,
What do you think of the current state of techno music? I mean, it's techno has always by its very nature been derivative, but how do you see the good stuff standing out at the moment? Because there's so much techno. It
it's
seems to be
tough.
everywhere.
Honestly, I'm kind of overall, like I'm content, but I'm a little bored. I was actually looking at my collection of just promos and stuff like MP3s I bought off the internet, not even including records. And I put in like 300 tracks this year already just on my collection, which is, in my opinion, way too many. Like I play a lot, but not enough to play all of that. And when I look at it, there's a lot of really good techno coming out at the moment, but none of it's really great. So I think overall, the average compared to years ago is much better. Like your average techno track is pretty quality at the moment, but I'm not leaving a gig thinking like, man, that track was so amazing tonight, or I'm not going out and hearing something that's blowing my mind. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of weird. I feel like we're at the cusp of another era again. I kind of felt this way in 2003 or four before the hit. Like there was a lot of that primate kind of club techno going on, and people were into it, but you could tell they were kind of curious to see what else was going on. And did you lose me there? Or you all
Yeah, I think we still have it. Just a bit choppy.
okay?
Yeah.
So I kind of feel that again. Like there's a lot of this quote unquote Berlin techno or Berghain techno that's going on, and it's all pretty good, but there's not a lot of innovative things going on within that. And then on the other side of it, you have more of the festival techno sound, which is good, but it's a bit just standard. So I think someone's going to come along real shortly and just kind of change it up, and then everybody else will follow suit for a couple of years. So I think it's good, but it's time for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something that's always constantly evolving, isn't it? So who knows what's around the corner. What's next for you then on the horizon? The album is out now, so I presumably you've a busy summer of touring around Europe and stuff. Singles wise, what can we expect over the next while?
Well, I just did the album recently, and so I'm actually trying to finish up a few remix commitments that I've already agreed to. I'm doing one for Truncate, one for Alexander Kowalski, and one for Thomas Schumacher. And then I'm working on my own EP for, it'll probably be towards the end of the year at this point now for that to come out. I'm not sure where. Um, I'm actually at the moment, like I'm doing a couple things. Like I said, I wanted to make some more experimental music again and kind of tune out from techno in the studio. But at the same time, whereas Monolith was very much like a more heavier, darker record, I'm trying to go back to some of my older records where they're a bit more funky or groovy. Um, so serious. It's not going to be cheeseball stuff, but for me, it's a hard record. So I want something that is a party record, but everybody wants to play. So that's what I'm kind of trying out right now.
On festivals, what are you looking forward to the most over the next couple of months? Any major gigs?
Let's see. Festivals wise, I've got a couple coming up, but honestly, I'm more of a club DJ, so I don't do a whole lot of festivals. I do like a couple a month. There's one in France I'm doing. I can't remember the name offhand, but I'm doing it with a couple of my friends. I think Joel Mall and Kari, maybe. I got to double check the lineup. But obviously, with friends, it's cool because sometimes you go to these big ones and it's great because there's tons of people, but you're still kind of standing around. And if you don't know anybody, it's hard. You can't share the experience. And I'd have to check my schedule, but I have 1 month in July that is pretty full. After that, in August, I'm taking some time for myself. So summer is actually starting to wind down a little bit, but the fall, I got a lot of great gigs coming up. Unfortunately, I can't announce them yet, but they're all stuff that I have first for me, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Excellent. Okay, well, look, thanks for taking the time to chat to us today on Sonic Academy.
No problem. Thank you.
Wish you all the best over the summer, and hope the album goes really well for you. It's been getting a few spins around here anyway. Dustin Zahn, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
See you, man. Bye-bye.